A spectre is haunting Europe. The spectre of communism. What a way to start a story, don't you think? It pulls you right in. It makes you wonder, what is this ghost, and why is it causing such a stir? This isn't the beginning of a spooky tale told around a campfire. It's the opening line of a small but mighty book, a book that shook the world to its very foundations. It's a declaration, a prophecy, and a call to arms all rolled into one. It suggests that an idea, invisible yet powerful, was drifting across nations, unsettling the powerful and giving hope to the powerless. An idea so profound it could change the very fabric of how we live, work, and relate to one another. This powerful little book is called the Manifesto of the Communist Party. But most of us just know it as the Communist Manifesto. It was written way back in 1848 by two thinkers, two friends who saw the world changing rapidly around them and wanted to understand why. Their names were Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. They weren't just writing down theories, they were watching the Industrial Revolution unfold. They saw factories sprouting up like mushrooms after a rainstorm. They saw steam engines and new machines changing everything. And they saw how these changes were creating new kinds of wealth and new kinds of poverty on a scale never seen before in human history. So, what is this book really about when you strip away all the complicated words and dusty historical context? Imagine you're watching a grand play. On the stage of history, Marx and Engels saw a story that kept repeating itself, just with different actors and different costumes. It was a story of conflict. A story of struggle between groups of people. They argued that this struggle wasn't just random noise, it was the engine driving all of human history forward. The book is their attempt to explain this engine, to show us how it works, and most importantly, to predict where it was heading next. In its heart, the manifesto is a simple story about two groups of people. One group owns all the important stuff needed to make things. The factories, the land, the machines. The other group has little more than their own ability to work. Let's get to know the men behind this ghost story, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. They weren't kings or generals. They were observers, writers and thinkers. Karl Marx was a philosopher and economist with a fiery spirit and a brilliant mind. He spent much of his life in exile, poring over books in the British Museum in London, trying to piece together the puzzle of human society. He saw history not as a series of random events, but as a predictable, almost scientific process. His partner in this intellectual adventure was Friedrich Engels. Engels was different. He was the son of a wealthy German factory owner. He saw the world of the Industrial Revolution from the inside. He managed one of his father's textile mills in Manchester, England. And what he saw there troubled him deeply. He saw the long hours, the dangerous conditions, and the meagre pay that the workers endured. He saw children working in factories instead of playing in fields. This first-hand experience gave their shared ideas a powerful human grounding. It wasn't just theory for him, it was the lived daily reality for millions of people. Together, they were a perfect team. Marx was the deep, systematic thinker, building the grand architecture of their theory. Engels was the practical observer and a gifted writer. They believed that philosophers before them had only tried to interpret the world. Their goal, they famously said, was to change it. Now, let's break down the first big idea. Marx and Engels looked at the society of their time and saw it was splitting into two main groups or classes. Think of it like a giant soccer match. On one team you have the owners. They own the field, the ball, the goals, and even the jerseys. Let's call them the bourgeoisie. This is just a fancy old word for the people who own the means of production, the factories, the land, and the large amounts of money or capital needed to build and operate them. On the other team, you have the players. They don't own any part of the field or the equipment. All they have is their skill and their energy to play the game. Let's call them the proletariat. This is the word Marx and Engels used for the working class. These are the people who sell their labor for a wage. They show up every day to work in the factories, operate the machines and create the products. Without them, the game wouldn't even happen. Here's the rub, according to the manifesto. The owners, the bourgeoisie, want to pay the players, the proletariat, as little as possible, just enough to keep them fed, clothed and able to come back to work the next day. This is because their main goal is to maximize their profit. Meanwhile, the players, the proletariat, naturally want to earn as much as they can for their work. They want better wages, safer working conditions, and shorter hours. So you have a built-in conflict. The interests of the two teams are fundamentally at odds. It's a constant tug-of-war over the value that is created by the workers' labor. The second big idea is that this conflict between classes isn't new. In fact, Marx and Engels argue it's the main engine of all human history. They open the book by saying, "The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles." Think of human history as a long road. The Manifesto suggests that the vehicle moving us along this road has always been this same kind of tension. They looked back through time and saw this pattern repeating. In ancient Rome, it was the struggle between patricians and plebeians, masters and slaves. In the Middle Ages, it was the conflict between feudal lords and serfs. The serf worked the lord's land in exchange for protection, and the lord lived off the fruit of the serf's labor. The fundamental dynamic was the same, just with different names and different rules. Each system created wealth for a few, based on the work of many. What was different in their time, the age of capitalism, was how clear and simple this conflict had become. The old, complicated ties of loyalty and obligation that existed under feudalism were being swept away. In their place was what they called the cash nexus. The French Revolution, for example, saw the rising bourgeoisie overthrow the old aristocracy of kings and nobles, but in doing so, Marx and Engels argued they also created their own gravediggers, the proletariat. The third key idea gets into the mechanics of why this system, capitalism, might be unstable. Imagine you're a craftsman, a skilled carpenter back in the old days. You design a chair, you carefully select the wood, you carve it with your own hands, and then you sell it. You feel a deep connection to that chair. Now, fast forward to the factory floor of the 19th century. You're no longer a craftsman. You're a worker on an assembly line. Your job, for 10 or 12 hours a day, is to attach the left leg to a chair. That's it. You don't design the chair, you don't choose the materials, and you don't see the finished product. Marx argued that this process alienates workers. It separates them from the product of their labor, from their own creative potential, and even from each other. The value of that chair comes from the labor put into it. But the worker who attaches the leg only gets paid a small fraction of that value in the form of a wage. The rest, the surplus value, is taken by the owner as profit. The owner then uses this profit, this capital, to build more factories, hire more workers, and generate even more profit. It's a cycle that must constantly expand. A business that doesn't grow dies. This creates a serious problem, according to the Manifesto. To keep profits high, owners might cut wages or replace workers with machines, but if workers have less money, who is going to buy all the chairs being produced? This can lead to a crisis of overproduction, where warehouses are full of goods that nobody can afford to buy. The system, in its relentless pursuit of piling up treasure, creates the very conditions for its own collapse. So, what was the solution proposed in the Communist Manifesto? The final part of their argument is a vision for a new kind of society. After the proletariat becomes aware of its situation, they would unite and overthrow the system of private ownership. The first would be for the workers to take control of the state. Then they would use that power to take the means of production out of the hands of private individuals and put them under the collective ownership of everyone. In this new world, the whole reason for working would change. Production would no longer be about generating private profit. It would be about meeting human needs. The principle guiding this society would be, as Marx later put it, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. You contribute what you can, and you receive what you need to live a full and healthy life. The alienation of the factory worker would disappear, replaced by a sense of collective purpose. This leads to the book's most famous and rousing call to action. It ends with the words, "The proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a world to win. Working men of all countries unite." This is the ultimate expression of their hope. They envisioned a global movement that would break the chains of exploitation and build a world based on cooperation, not competition. Today is August 13th, 2025. More than 175 years have passed since Marx and Engels first wrote about that spectre haunting Europe. The revolutions they predicted did happen, but they often led to brutal dictatorships and state control that looked very different from the free, cooperative society they envisioned. The very word communism is now loaded with the heavy history of the 20th century. For many, it brings to mind images of totalitarianism, not liberation. So, is this little book just a historical relic? I don't think so. The world may have changed, but the questions the manifesto asks are still very much with us. We still talk about the growing gap between the super-rich and everyone else. We still worry about the power of large corporations that are wealthier than many countries. Think about the gig economy. A driver for a ride-sharing app owns their car, but they don't own the platform that connects them to customers. They are classified as independent contractors, yet their fares and working conditions are largely dictated by an algorithm designed to maximize the platform's profit. We don't have to agree with the manifesto's proposed solutions to recognize the power of its diagnosis. It provides us with a lens, a way of looking at the world. It encourages us to ask critical questions. Who benefits from the way things are? Who pays the price? And could things be different? So, let me leave you with this thought. If Marx and Engels were writing today, looking at our world of smartphones, artificial intelligence and global finance, what spectre would they see haunting us now?